I'm Bill Patton with 720 Degree Coaching, and it's my pleasure to have on the show Sarah Flotell, who is a tennis coach, but also a somatic coach. And this is something that is a really interesting science and not easily understood. So we're going to have a conversation about somatic counseling and treatment and exploration, I guess I think exploration's probably the best way to think about it.
And
So,
experiencing exploration, definitely. Yeah.
so Sarah, how are you today?
Not bad, thank you. I'm enjoying the winter. It's -2 here. It's lovely.
Oh, terrific. That would be Celsius.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, Celsius.
Well, you guys are Fahrenheit, of course you are. Yeah.
Yeah, because we have the weird system, but that would be 30 degrees for us. So
30 degrees. Okay, I wish it was 30 degrees Celsius. That would be nice.
That would be quite awesome. All right, so where do we start this discussion? And
yeah, well, tennis is that's my realm. That's the sport that I'm totally in love with and addicted to. I think so. Where I started with it was it started with like more of a spiritual element, where I'm looking at what's going on with my spirit and my soul and my mind and my body, and it all became quite confusing when I was playing tennis, because I knew I had technical stuff to deal with, and it's the same with players that I work with when I coach them. And I'm looking at what kind of hacks and shortcuts can I find to bypass the anxiety in here and get that nice loose flowing energy going through my body. So I tried a load of stuff, tried meditating before I play, all that stuff, and it's useful. But I found the magic key was to really start noticing what was going on in my body at that time. And just quite simply, the beginnings of it all was like just to put my hand on my heart as often as I could and feel it, that heart is beating, I'm alive, I'm right here, I don't need to be worried about anything. And so it's really just connecting with the body in a really, really subtle but precise way. And it's easy in theory, but in practice, you've got to do it a lot to get used to it. So to take it even further, when I work with a player or work with myself even, to get into this somatic stuff, I use primitive movement. I use like a pattern of reflexive movements that I've learned from various different modalities to get that player and get myself almost like crawling and moving like a baby again, so they become so hyper aware of what's going on in their body that it just opens up new pathways, like repatterns the brain and goes, actually, do you know what, I'm far more coordinated than I thought I was. And then everything just seems to get easier with very little work. We're talking only 5 minutes a day you do maximum with these kind of exercises.
Okay, and you know what, that's a wonderful introduction. Now, who are you? And why should we listen to you? So, I mean, yeah, who is Sarah Flotell? And I mean, what's kind of your background in coaching, and what's your background in exploration of this somatic wisdom?
The somatic wisdom. Well, I'm a singer and songwriter by trade. I've always been a musician. I've always been a tennis player as well. And over the last 5 years, I took my coach's badges and started coaching on court, and that was okay, but I'm really into the mental aspect of it. So I trained in loads of different therapeutic modalities, and I've read and studied. Half my degrees in psychology, half is in creative writing. So I've just started to blend all these different, facets of knowledge and experiencing into my tennis coaching. And now I work purely with sports people and other performance level people, actors, musicians, on their body language, on their mastery, on their anxiety, at a really deep and very simple level. So I'm just blending all the things that I've loved and I've studied and I've nurtured and bringing it into a coaching realm now. So it's sort of getting that wisdom out there.
First ways that you began to work with athletes and the first issues that you began to address.
So I think I'm going to really clasp onto your word, transformative. That's where I come in. I mean, parents, coaches, people will get me in, or they sort of find me online when they've run out of ideas, where they're kind of, yes, I've been working very hard with this coach, I've got a psychologist, I've got all this, and they kind of run out of ideas. So I was working with a young athlete once, a young tennis player, and she was sort of on that dyspraxic, dyslexic scale, all sorts of stuff going on, all sorts of coordination stuff, very tall for her age. Emotional responses were off the scale on core. So I worked with her for 6 months, and we did a full like primitive reflex integration programs, a full somatic, like primitive, really deep coordination stuff. And we did loads of creative stuff. Like you talk to a sports person, say, we're going to do some singing or some artwork, and they go like, but you bring it in gently. And then, as you said before, they learn to express themselves in a different way. And they start to get in touch with that soul and spirit work inside that previously didn't exist in their construct, in that strict training regime, which is fantastic. But something happens in tennis competition where all of that can disappear in a moment. And then a player can get very upset and very tight, and it's gone. And then they're kind of left on their own with their soul and their inner thoughts. And there's no controlling that. You can't set up a training program for the soul. And I find that when they're on court, the only way, and I would always teach this to them again and again, the only way to get that flow, all the stuff that you've learned, you've trained, that you've put thousands of hours into, is to fall in love with where you're at. Be kind to yourself, be gentle. This is a particular type of player who really struggles with the emotions. And they're the people that tend to come to me because they need a real gentle, spiritual, soul, whole person approach.
Interesting. And yeah, I mean, I'm similar in that people who have been frustrated and done poorly and, feel like they're at their wit's end come to me, and they get maybe not such a gentle approach, but I do get very deeply into how are they thinking about playing now. And coaching is a creative enterprise.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so I think of myself as a farmer and as a sculptor. So you have to plow the fields. Right, I have to plow the fields. I've got to dig deep to get to plant the seeds, and then you got to water them, and then you wait. You have to be very patient.
Got to wait, yeah.
Right? You have to be patient. You have to let the stuff flower. And then, the other thing is that, I look at what somebody's doing and I'm like, okay, where's my next little cut? Right? And, it has to be very precise. So you don't go crazy with the chisel because you get one shot at it. Right? So taking a very measured approach to any changes, especially as players progress and they become more of closer to a finished work of marble, then you have to be very selective about what you're doing there. But what I find is that people enter the court as very anxious people, and about 80% of my students report that the number one thing that they learned in lesson 1 is how to relax. Can you get into relaxation?
Oh, the magical word of relaxation. It's that, I was working with a young guy, field hockey player, and he said, I just keep trying to relax. I said, did you ever relax because anybody ever told you to? He's like, never. It makes it worse. So I said, I'm not going to tell you anything about relaxation. You're going to learn all that for yourself. But what I'm going to do is teach you a toolbox of tricks, and you can pick one out whenever you like.
A tall box of tricks.
Box of tricks. I'm going to take you all the stuff.
You Brits are amazing. A tall box of tricks.
A toolbox of tricks.
I know, I want the short box. I don't want so many options. Anyway,
a toolbox. It's in like garage tools.
Yes, garage, in the garage.
Yeah, tools. The toolbox. Okay. I give them a toolbox, these youngsters.
Okay.
And but actually, I mean, I'll redact a bit further. Before I give this toolbox out, I like to find out some real kind of base information, like what's the dominant eye, dominant hand, dominant ear, all that kind of neuro stuff to set up a profile. And this is sort of, I learned this from when I worked with learning difficulties, kids with learning difficulties, set up their dominance profiling and find out what becomes limited under stress. So that's my very first port of call.
Wow, that's
good
neat.
stuff.
I do that same kind of stuff. Okay, good. Let's dig into that a little bit more. So give us a quick case study.
Case study. Young guy, he's up for selection for international duty but never quite makes a squad. We had a very long session, so I checked all the dominant stuff, and we find out that he's limited under stress auditory and exaggerated movement. So I said, what do we do about that? Well, I'll give you a few different things you can do with the auditory. I'm a musician as well, so I said we were talking really musical. So I said to him, put your headphones on before a hockey match and listen to one sound. Pick one sound out. You don't have to like the song or anything. Pick one sound out and focus on that. And then I gave him a couple of very primitive movement exercises, really, really foundational stuff. And he picked those two things to do, amongst others. And he was selected next camp straight in, because we cut the noise out. I said, I know you're worried, I know you're anxious, you're getting sick before matches, you're in a real mess, but I'm giving you no techniques, no thought work whatsoever, because it's such a mess at this point. So one musical activity to kind of enhance the auditory stuff, because he was saying, when I'm on pitch and I'm stressed, I can't even hear my teammates calling me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm tightening the stick, or I'm too loose, and okay. So we did a few different like neuro-y activities, a few different like neurological coordination bits, and obviously I always set a meditation as well, because that's the kind of glue you've got to get with the spiritual stuff, even if a tiny bit, to glue it all together, to know that.
I find that almost no tennis players that I meet know which is their dominant eye.
Okay, that's interesting.
And that's really important, because that's a large percentage of your sighting of the ball is with your dominant eye. And so then
left to right crossing, all that stuff.
Well, and then not only that, but the intentionality of actually, okay, this is my dominant eye, I'm going to use it, I'm going to make sure that it's always engaged. So yeah, I mean, it's a huge thing. It really is. And so no, I mean, I'm like, hey, do you know what your dominant eye is? No. Okay, let's test for it. All right. So, all right. So how do you test for the dominant eye?
I do the simple one that I used to do when I worked in schools, of getting the pencil or the pen, lining it up with a vertical structure, a window frame or something, and left eye, right eye, whichever one stays in place.
Oh, that's interesting. I like this one. Hold a tiny circle. So hold a tiny circle actually both eyes. Look through a little tiny thing at something in the distance, and then close one eye, and whichever eye you can't see it with is not your dominant eye.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's a nice one.
So yeah, so I'm,
that's quicker actually. I'm going to take that one. Thanks.
Yeah, that's good. But yeah, I mean, and then just understanding that your dominant eye is doing most of the seeing, and then the rest, your other eyes providing stereoscopic vision.
I'm doing like a little lay study at my tennis club. I've got about 12 samples so far of club players, varying different standards, and doing dominance profiling through most of them. And there are a few anomalies, I'm one of them, but most of them fit the typical, they like reading left to right, they're all right-handed, they all have very, very similar dominance profiles, they're all accountants, they all work in logic-based professions, and they all play in the higher teams. So it's really, really interesting. And for me, I'm all over the place. I'm right-footed, left-handed, right eye, left ear, creative brain dominant. So everything takes me a very, very long time to learn. I have to feel everything. I'm totally kinesthetic. But most of the higher level players I've ever worked with in any sport are all very visual dominant.
That's interesting. All right. So this plays into laterality.
Laterality. Oh yeah. Love it. Love it.
So, because so I wrote a book called The Visual Training for Tennis, and we get into cross dextral versus pure dextral. And so if you're right-handed and left eye dominant, then you're cross dextral. And it seems as though people who are cross dextral might have an advantage in learning how to play tennis, because conventional tennis wisdom works for them. But people who are pure dextral, not so much. So then then it goes all the way down pretty much. I mean, you've got your hand, I mean, you've got obviously your ear, but then you have a hip that's dominant, and you have a spin preference in your body.
Yeah.
and you have a foot that you're going to prefer to balance on. So in what way do you address those issues that come up?
I always end up working with a reflex, the asymmetrical tonic neck reflex. That's the one that when a baby's coming down the birth canal, ideally, if they do get to be born naturally, that's the one that gets that initiates the twist so they can be born easily. So I'm going way back, like that's where I'll go really primal.
Wow. So
And
they come out shot out of a rifle. They're not, it's not a musket, it's a rifle. The
they come
bullet
out
is
nice and
shooting.
easily, nice and smoothly. Everything, to be honest, well, actually, it does not
Did
athletes.
you
These
really
are
say it's nice and easy?
nice
Come
and
on.
easy for the baby,
Oh,
not for the
I,
mum.
oh no, I don't think it's true for the baby, and I'll tell you why later. But anyway, keep going.
Yeah, I suppose I'm using it more in a metaphorical way. That if that
Yeah.
birth, all the reflexes are kicking in, and all the twisting's done in as natural way as possible. But most of the time, if there are kind of some deep coordination issues, that baby's born by cesarean section. They missed out a whole load of reflex integration. So to work with that, I would sort of replicate the reflex action by using isometric pressure with my hands and get that person to isolate tight. We're talking tiny movements. So if the head is, for example, my ATNR is not great in that direction towards my right. So I would put pressure on the right hand side of my head, push back the left shoulder and make those two coordinated. A therapist would do it with me. It's not something you can do on your own. But I would start with that. I start with tiny, and then I bring in the knee. So we are really coordinating at a real deep fascial level. That's where I'd start working with that lateral dominance issues in the body there. Then I'd bring in vision and get them. I'd either hang artwork above them or just get them to draw imaginary shapes with the eyes on infinity symbol and so on. So lots of real fine-tuning stuff, but always coming back to the infant reflexes. That's where I'm trained, but it does make a lot of sense as well, because all the exercises they teach us in that training they're just about coordinating the brain anyway, whether it's reflexive related or not.
Yeah. This next bit might have no practical use at all, but it's just darn entertaining. So I have a little pet theory, and so far it hasn't been proven wrong. So I'm going to keep rolling with it, that children up until about age 3, maybe 3.5 years old, can still remember being born. So I do this. I interview children who have just learned to talk, right? And I ask them, do you remember being born? And they go, and then I go, was it easy or was it hard, right? And they go, it was hard.
Oh, love them.
It was hard. Yeah. Right? And then you go, do you remember when you saw your mommy for the first time? And they just beam. And
they
then
love it.
you can't fake that. That's not fakeable. Nobody, they haven't learned to act yet, So I mean, it's really kind of amazing how that primal experience of being born stays with them up until, I guess, the point where the brain gets too full of other information to really recall that. I don't know what the deal is.
By 3, a lot of your primitive postural reflexes would have been integrated anyway, ideally, unless there's some particular stresses or other stuff going on. But that makes sense. And then also the other thing I look at is how stressed was mum during pregnancy and what stuff was going on. All this, like the cortisol response, because I was reading a great article the other week about dopamine response, and the player that's most likely to win the third set is the person who can regulate their dopamine response, so they don't slow ball and they don't go crazy with it. So and then I look at that. I sit and watch them on the side of the court. I'm like, okay.
So let's get into dopamine. That's a great one. Okay, so the way we see this most often on the court with less experienced players is ace followed by double fault.
Yeah.
Okay, so explain that. Explain ace followed by double fault in terms of dopamine.
Well, you're either producing too much or producing too little, and you
Okay.
can't regulate it.
Right,
That's
right, right.
how, and I experienced that as a player myself. So I do plenty of work on that off the court. It's that regulation. I think with tennis, it's such fine lines, isn't it? And on regulating that dopamine response.
Yeah.
And
Now, okay. The interesting thing. So dopamine essentially makes you uncoordinated for a
yeah,
short period of time, right? So now I have another pet theory. Again, not proven wrong, and it's that one deep breath can eliminate the dopamine.
long out breath.
Yes. So
That's
you can exhale the dopamine and break that because then it won't be dwelling in your brain. And so that's part of the power of Jim Lair's 16-second cure is the
okay.
breathing aspect is so huge. Let me give you a scenario and then tell me a little bit more about how you might have handled this differently. But I had a girl in a close match, and she's easily the favorite, and she's won the first set 6-love, and she's starting to distract herself with other stuff. She's talking to people she ought not to be talking to,
Okay, yeah,
and I'm like, all right, come on, get back to work. And then she finds herself in a close set that she then is losing. And she says to me, all of my problems have just now hit me all at once. All right. So, and she's got some mental challenges. She is in therapy to help her solve some of these
yeah.
issues. So they now are attacking her. What do we do there?
Well, look, we got, there's a few prongs to this one. You've got to do the off-court restorative work. That's the foundation, isn't it? But
Mm-hmm.
I would with someone like that. And again, I always come back to myself because I have to do so much work it, I, historically in life, in tennis, on myself to get into a great state of mind and a great state of being, years and years of work. So I would do full primitive reflex integration program with her. I'd do the whole lot, but I would also these players that when everything just boils up to the surface, I just give them one technique of something, some kind of like kinesiology, some kind of somatic experience in movement of just you stand there and you tap, you do
Okay.
something in the body. Forget your brain's gone. Your brain is so active. You're not pulling that back in. You're not going to suddenly become all spiritual and enlightened. It's not happening. You're going to have to work for years on that. But go to the body, thump the chest, tap the hands, trace
Yeah.
the logo on your racket. You've got to do something. You can't just give up on it. I'm quite firm,
So
although I'm gentle. I'm very firm on that. We don't give up. And I said to every player ever I work with, I said, I don't want you to look at me once. If you do, I will look right through you. I don't want you looking off the court or anything. No matter what state you're in, you are out on that court, and it's you are taking 100% responsibility for where you're at. And even that's like age 13 up. When they're younger, maybe I'm a little bit more maternal with it, but if you take 100% responsibility, and you're going to find something to do. And if you blow the match up, you blow the match up. We go back and we work again.
yeah, and that the emotional freedom therapy, the tapping, this is something that was introduced to me by Linda LeClaire, who's a great mental coach. But that's a technique that was largely popularized by a guy named Greg Warburton,
Okay, yeah.
and he helped the Oregon State men's baseball team win a couple national championships. And so
Okay.
it was really interesting to see on the TV that they were showing a player tapping,
Exactly. All
Yes,
that.
and they were, they couldn't really explain it. Oh, I gotta turn this call off. Okay. They couldn't really explain what was happening, but they kind of went into, oh, it's a ritual that they do that's sort of a thing. But no, I've used that quite a bit myself. I've gone away from it in recent months, but
I come
helped me.
back and forth to it.
Yeah, but
Yeah, it's a
it's
funny one
helped
to
me deal with
explain
pain.
with
Uh,
pain. Yeah.
with pain, injury recovery, and whatnot. And then another thing that I've started doing is using musical frequencies.
Yeah. Frequency stuff. Great.
Now, here's a strange thing, and this is very timely because last night, all of a sudden, I went on Spotify and I put pain frequencies, and I put my earbuds in, and now I feel like I've made a breakthrough discovery for myself
The pain
that these
frequency.
that these theta wave pain frequencies are really helping me a lot all of a sudden. So had a really good night's sleep. So you want to get into, why don't you go a little bit more into tapping and why tapping is effective, and then get into the frequencies.
Tapping, I find, as you said, I find it very much a tool rather than something that I would use as my holistic practice. It's because it's quite specific and it's quite cognitive, more on or off court. On court is more of just like, stop thinking, just do something to your body, like, you know,
Yeah.
just as part of emotional first aid. Is it can be useful. But I worked with someone once, and she on court she was fine, but she hated running, like to the point where she couldn't breathe if we went on even a couple of mile run. It was a serious thing going on her body. It was like fight, flight, freeze all at once. So I said, look, do you want to try something new? Just go with me, and if it's all right for you. She said yes. I said, well, it's fine. Let's go over to the butt side of the court, and we tapped for a few rounds, and that was it. Gone.
Mm.
Gone. That fear of running. They said, I don't even know what it was. I said, well, we don't need to know what it was. We just that's the whole thing.
Mm.
All this analyzing continuously. That's for the academics. You leave that
Mm-hmm.
to them. You just got to know that it doesn't feel good. I want it gone, and there you go. So tapping for me is useful for very specific things,
Mm.
and for take my mind off it. Like I played a tiebreaker on Saturday. I played awful in the first set, and I said, no more, no more. I'm going to hand this over. I'm handing this over to my spiritual self. No more thinking. Pack it in. And I did. I just said, like, you take it now, God. But I had to play a tiebreak. And before the tiebreak, I'm like, I must I look crazy on the court. I don't care. Banging my chest, tapping everything, because that's it. I have at that stress point, I've got to do something to keep the thoughts out. So I think back, tapping on the body, banging on the body, whatever it is, you've got to do
Mm-hmm.
something to. The overactive mind kills it, doesn't it, in tennis? Just
Right, right. Well, so coming back to this girl, basically what I did is I just asked her to breathe deeply, pay attention to your breathing, and just keep reminding yourself that you want to finish this match well.
Mm.
What do you want? You want to win this match. So as it was, she fell behind quickly in the second set tiebreaker, and then it went to a match tiebreaker, which I really hate. And
Oh,
the
yeah.
10-point tiebreaker to decide a match, which she quickly fell behind 5-1. And
Okay.
as she was changing sides at 5-1, I said, "Remember what we talked about." And then I mean, in a short while, she was shaking hands, and I was like, "Ah, it's over. She's lost."
Okay.
But she won 10-6. So I was distracted by other matches, so I didn't really see how it was that she did that.
Okay.
But I
That's
can only
interesting you
imagine
say
that.
that, isn't it? That you got a little bit distracted, and she just had to kind of get on with it. You planted the seeds. You did all that work, and she's like, oh, well, one of my favorite things to do, which
Okay,
is actually,
wait. No, I got something else for you. To what extent do coaches sabotage players by having a fantasy of having some control over the match?
immensely, unbelievably. I'm so strict with myself. I'm brutally strict with myself. When I go to tournaments or wherever I'm at, my only job is to sit at the side in a neutral pose. If I'm feeling nervous, I'm going to cover my solar plexus or something. I'm do something to set myself, and to sit and clean up my own junk.
Mm.
Just to work on myself, on my own thoughts. And I'm aware, I care, but this is like my anxiety, my excitement, all this stuff. You're sitting there and you're going crazy, or whatever, or you're trying to fix what's going on. But I work very, very hard on my own feelings, and just like being neutral to them, but to myself as well.
Interesting.
And
Okay, so one thing I tell my teenagers is I know that just by virtue of where you are in your development, you may want to try to please me.
yeah, yeah.
And so what I want you to know is I'm always pleased with you. So win or lose, it doesn't matter. I mean, as long as if you're not giving the right effort, I'm not pleased. But as long as you're giving the right effort level, then I'm pleased with you.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
win or lose. And then I'm hoping that you get to the point where you play for your own pleasure.
For the love of it, that's it. That's the magic trick for me. That, like, when you're in distress, anyone's in distress, any point in their life, all they want is to feel loved, either by themselves or by somebody else or by the situation. And it's generating that love when you're under extreme pressure and tiebreak or whatever it is, and just never forgetting how much you love it anyway. You love striking the ball. We see it in training. We love it. We love ripping baskets of balls. It's the best feeling on planet. And when you go into match play, all of that love can disappear because of the expectation. That kills love. It kills the spirit. And it's part of it, the expectation. But when you can shift expectation to experiencing, and we're going all spiritual here, but when you're left on court on your own on a tournament, you are on your own with your own spirit and soul. That's it. It's just you and that ball. And
Okay.
by just saying, I do it. If I've got in a mess, I'll be like, just don't forget how much I love this. I love you, tennis ball. I love you. Just the same thing. I love you. I just love you. I love you, court. I love your position.
I'm a big believer that love of the game and just enjoyment of playing is a huge part of the mental game, and it doesn't get enough. It doesn't, people think that that's wacko. So okay, so we need to wrap up here shortly. Yeah. So what's one practical thing that you would give to a tennis player and say, if you want to examine, if you want to discover this stuff, where's a good place to start?
Okay, I draw from far and wide, and the modalities I've trained in aren't necessarily designed for sports people. It's me that's adapted them. So they can always look at my websites, but I'm going to give them one takeaway move to use. One takeaway move. You might know already. But when they have a change of ends, and they're activated, like they're really up, or even before the match, whenever it is, before is good, just to go in the hook. So hands crossed over into heart.
Yes.
Cook's hook, and even if your mind is racing and you are going absolutely crazy, you will still get a little bit of womb-like safety. You're still going to have.
Greg Warburton uses that move. That's interesting. So, all right, very good.
That's a practical takeaway, but
okay. Now, coaches who want to engage their players, on a different level to help them, get over some kind of performance block, where's a good place for them to start?
They can look up rhythmic movement training, anything to do with retained reflexes and integrated reflexes. They won't find a direct link to sport. It's very useful in sport, but it's more of a modality that exists in the kind of autistic spectrum special needs scale. So if they want to look at that real fine tuning of coordination, the retained reflex is a good place to start. And of course, anything like meditation, mindfulness, which yourself, you use in your program. I just think for me, it's not just one thing. It's the whole person, the mind, the body, the spirit, the soul.
Right. Right. Yeah, I know we've both been influenced by Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen. So, I thought we were going to talk about her some, but this is kind of an amazing thing, and I have to honestly say I really don't understand a lot of this stuff. But her son worked for me as a tennis pro, and he's one of the most amazing people I've ever had working with me. And so I was gifted this book, which is pretty special. What can you say about Bonnie's influence on how people can approach coaching?
Well, for me, I watch her stuff because I just find it fascinating. And it's one of those she's one of those practitioners, those teachers that I don't need to know the meaning behind what she's doing. I just know that it is so deeply natural and so wonderful for the human body that you just do it. So I take a look. I had a girl who had trouble expressing herself verbally. We found that out through artwork and other different things. And I remembered a Bonnie Bainbridge video that I've watched about crawling and about how the hips are directly related to the voice. And so I went back to crawling activities and really taught that person, or got her to teach herself again how to crawl. And ironically, she'd missed out the crawling stage when she was a baby. So there was something that needed to go on there. And so these, whether it's sport related or not, coaches can look at this stuff, this deeply somatic stuff, and just they can use it in warm-ups, they can use it in all sorts of different places. And there doesn't actually necessarily have to have an application or a meaning. It's the not knowing the meaning and just having the experiencing, for me. And that helps players in so many ways as well. They don't have to analyze everything and know the meaning behind it. They just have to experience it in their body that feels good for them or feels right for them. So I just say to coaches, like, think way off and try different things, because it's generally is do no harm.
Generally, and I think one of the most harmful things that parents do is they overhelp their children. So, I mean, part of the issues that people experience for their lifetime are caused by the fact that their parents overhelped them when they were small by
let them be,
holding them, picking them up when they really need to get there on their own, putting them in strange seats that are meant to hold them erect when they're not really ready to hold themselves erect yet. They've got to work. They have to resolve that. The musculature needs to develop for that to happen.
All the reflexes, and you've got to have natural development. My kids, they ask me to do something. If they can do it themselves, that's it. It's my job to take care of the emotional response inside of me and sit calmly and go, no, I'm not doing that for you right now, but I'm right here with how you feel. That is, I sit here.
That looks difficult. I empathize with your plight.
It's difficult, but it takes the pressure off. I'm not finding solutions. I'm not trying to fix them. I don't want to help them, but I just have to constantly clean up my own triggers and traumas and stuff. And that just, yes, it's difficult, but it's simple in a way. And I love practicing it. It's almost meditation constantly. And they love it in the end. They're like, oh, actually, I did do that for myself. Yes, you did. Well done.
Yeah. Well, then there's a sense of accomplishment and all of that.
And so, all right. Timeline,
Any final words here today, Sarah? I mean, I had no idea this conversation would turn out like this, but I did expect that it would be this good.
Well, that's it. There's that surrender of letting go and experiencing and trusting that we don't know each other well, and we just hook up on Zoom. And so it's an absolute pleasure. I think I contacted you a few days ago saying I've done this online course of meditations and movements and stuff for players, and you said, come on, let's talk about this. So I'm like there trying to get my course out to a wider world rather than just for a few players in London. And here we are having this incredible conversation.
No, it's fun. And so in the show notes, this will be on YouTube in a little while. So in the show notes, there'll be a link to your course.
Thank you.
And so that's a do it in person thing, or do you also have some online resources?
Well, it's all online. This is my DIY offering. So this is all the stuff that I do with players and the homeworks that I set them, things that I send them, and it's all in DIY. And there is do it in person, there's do it online. So that's also possible to work with me directly as well. But this is a full DIY thing that you can take on tour. Okay,
that's amazing. And I think Sarah will come up with some kind of discount for you because she was on the show. So there will be a discount code or something, and that will also be in the show notes shortly. And all right. So thank you for coming on the show, Sarah. It was definitely a serendipity that we became Facebook friends, and then within days we're having an interview right here. I don't know what happened there.
We don't get this in the UK. We don't get this kind of conversation in the UK. Everything's
Really?
very.
I thought, wow, I thought, man, all the Brits I meet think they're smarter than me, and that
Exactly.
they're above speaking to me and whatnot.
And
Why
they
is
wait.
that?
You've got to book it. I don't. I think it's that. My mum's Irish, so I'm not. I'm not British at all, really. I don't identify. I was brought up in total Irish community.
Okay. Yeah,
So
my family got kicked out of Ireland. Yeah, and Northern Scotland, Northern Ireland. Yeah, sent to the New World.
wow, you must have been rebels. But so yes, in Britain, everything is, even in social, you kind of have to book an appointment, and it's quite stuffy, really. Because
Oh my
in Ireland, you
goodness.
get off the plane and you can be friends with 10 people in a minute.
Yeah, snap out of it, people. Come on.
Oh,
All right, Sarah, thank you for coming on,
thank
and
you.
we'll be in contact.
Yes. Take care.
All right, bye bye.